They humiliated her on the floor. The Alpha King's move shocked everyone. The great hall of Kalen's castle was alive with whispers. Crystal chandeliers reflected the flickering torchlight, casting shadows that danced across the cold marble floors. Nobles in gilded silks and jeweled crowns formed tight clusters, their eyes sharp with judgment, their lips quick with rumors. At the center of the room, under the grand arch of the throne, knelt a young woman whose presence seemed almost impossible in such a place of power. Her name was Leora, and today she had become the court's newest object of ridicule. The nobles' laughter rang like cold bells, echoing through the hall as if it delighted in her humiliation. Her hands trembled as she lowered her gaze to the floor, feeling the sting of shame in every glance. She was an outsider, brought here under false accusations by those jealous of her quiet strength. None had expected her to speak or fight, and the mockery was as sharp as any blade. Yet, beneath her humiliation, a quiet fire burned. Leora's heart, though racing with fear, refused to bow completely. She reminded herself that strength was not always shown through defiance, brusque. Sometimes it was held quietly, waiting for the right moment. At the throne, King Kalen watched. He sat tall, a figure carved from shadow and authority, with eyes that seemed to pierce through every secret and lie. His reputation was legendary, ruthless to enemies, unyielding in his rule and feared by all who dared question him, Braken. And yet, as he observed the girl on the floor, a subtle curiosity stirred in him. He noticed the tremor of defiance in her posture, the glimmer of pride she refused to extinguish, even when every noble's gaze was upon her. The hall was silent for a moment, broken only by a low chuckle from one of the more daring courtiers. "Is this what the great Alpha King allows?" the man sneered. "A mere peasant brought to ruin before the throne?" The nobles erupted into laughter once more, relishing in the mockery. Leora felt herself shrinking, wishing she could disappear into the cold marble beneath her. But yet Kalen did nothing. His expression remained unreadable, but his dark eyes never left her. It was then that a hush fell over the hall. Whispers of an old prophecy circulated among the nobles, words half remembered and spoken with awe. "The one who falls before the throne shall rise to command the king's heart." No one spoke it aloud in fear, but Kalen's eyes lingered on Leora as though he had heard it clearly, as though he alone understood the weight of its meaning. The court watched, expecting the king to remain indifferent. But Kalen, in a move that shocked everyone, rose from his throne. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Every noble froze, every servant stilled, and the flames in the chandeliers seemed to flicker as if the world itself paused. Balin stepped forward, each movement measured, deliberate, and filled with authority. When he reached Leora, he bent slightly, and with a single, firm hand lifted her from the cold marble floor. The hall erupted in murmurs and gasps. Some nobles whispered in fear, others in indignation. No one had ever seen Kalen act with such attention toward a subject in disgrace. "Stand," he said, his voice deep and commanding, yet carrying a softness that surprised even those closest to him. "No one here shall touch her again." The nobles shifted uneasily. It was unheard of. To protect the humiliated, to oppose the court's laughter so openly, it was almost blasphemous. Kalen's gaze swept the hall, and the message was clear. Those who had mocked her would face consequences if they dared to act further. Leora, though stunned, felt a strange warmth amidst the humiliation. The hand that had lifted her was heavy with power, yes, but it was also a shield. But in that moment she realized something remarkable. The man before her was not only the Alpha King, but a man capable of understanding courage, even in the humblest of hearts. The king's eyes met hers. There was no mockery there, no judgment, only curiosity, and perhaps something more dangerous, a recognition of her worth, a spark of interest she could neither deny nor fully comprehend. Her heart raced, an unfamiliar mixture of fear and something far more complicated. "Who is she?" demanded one of the nobles, a man with a long, sharp face and eyes like cold steel. "Why protect her? She is nothing to this court." Kalen did not answer immediately. Instead, he let his gaze linger on Leora, as though drawing strength and understanding from her very presence. Then he spoke, each word deliberate and echoing through the hall. "She is under my protection," he said, "and she will remain so for reasons none of you are yet capable of understanding." Protection from the Alpha King was not granted lightly. Some speculated she might be a secret ally. Others thought her useful in some hidden plan. Leora, however, understood none of this. She only knew that the hand that had lifted her had changed everything. Her humiliation remained, but it was now tempered with a strange, unspoken connection to the man who had saved her from the floor. As the nobles retreated into uneasy silence, Kalen returned to his throne, but his eyes never left her. There was a storm behind his calm exterior, a storm that hinted at hidden depths, hidden power, and hidden pain. Leora felt herself drawn to him despite the fear and uncertainty that churned within her. For she knew this man was dangerous, not only because of his crown or his strength, but because he could see the truth behind appearances. And she, in all her humility, felt seen in a way no one else had ever offered. The court day ended, but Leora was not dismissed. Instead, Kalen gave a subtle gesture, a summons to remain near the throne. She would stay in the castle, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as something else entirely. The meaning of her presence was unclear, even to her. Yet she could feel the weight of destiny pressing upon her. That night, alone in the dim corridors of the castle, Leora's mind raced. She thought of the mockery, the cold eyes of the nobles, the weight of Kalen's gaze, and the strange thrill that had accompanied his unexpected protection. She realized with both fear and anticipation that her life had irrevocably changed. She was no longer just a girl dragged before the throne. She was now a player in a game she did not yet understand, and the stakes were higher than she could imagine. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Kalen sat alone, staring into the flickering flames of the great hearth. His mind was a tangle of rules, curses, and expectations, yet one thought persisted above all. The girl who had been humiliated today was different. She was not like the others who had bent and bowed, who had crumbled beneath the weight of power. There was something in her defiance, her quiet strength, that called to him, stirring something he had long believed buried. Best he did not yet know if it was danger or salvation. But he knew one truth. She had entered his world, and nothing, neither prophecy, curse, nor crown, would allow her to leave unchanged. Breath. As the first moonlight of the evening filtered through the tall windows, falling upon the cold marble floors where she had knelt, Leora felt a shiver run through her. Somewhere deep within, she knew the humiliation of the day was not the end. But it was only the beginning. And in the stillness of the castle, Kalen's voice, though silent, seemed to echo. "This is only the first move." Break. The prophecy whispered on the wind, almost imperceptible. The one who falls before the throne shall rise to command the king's heart. Leora did not yet understand the truth of the words nor the depth of the bond that had begun to form, but something inside her stirred, a spark of courage, of defiance, and of longing she could neither name nor resist. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the court, unseen eyes watched, aware that this simple act of protection might ignite a chain of events that would shake the kingdom to its very foundations. The first act of humiliation had ended, but the story, her story, and the Alpha King's, was only just beginning. The sun had barely risen when Leora was escorted to the castle's eastern wing. The corridor smelled of cold stone and waxed floors, and the echo of her footsteps reminded her of how far she had fallen and how far she still had to rise. Though she had been spared further humiliation in the court, her presence in Kaelin's castle was not free from scrutiny. The nobles watched her with suspicion, whispers following her like shadows. Kaelin, the Alpha King, appeared indifferent at first, but the quiet storm in his dark eyes betrayed a curiosity that neither insult nor distance could hide. Leora had quickly realized that his attention was not a mere formality, it was something more dangerous, more compelling. She felt it even as she walked the long hallways. A sense that her life was no longer entirely her own. The eastern wing was quiet, far from the prying eyes of the court. Servants moved silently, their heads lowered, knowing better than to speak too loudly in Kaelin's presence. Leora's room was simple yet elegant, with heavy curtains, a small hearth, and a desk of polished oak. It was enough for her to feel safe for a moment, yet the weight of destiny pressed against her chest.
That afternoon, Kaelin summoned her to the throne room.
She entered, careful not to betray the nervousness that still clung to her. He was already there, seated in his high throne, the air around him heavy with authority. "You are under my protection," Kaelin said, his voice low but commanding. "And you will remain here in the castle." "I have reasons that go beyond what you can understand." Leora bowed her head, unsure of what to say. Rasp. She felt both grateful and wary, for protection in Kaelin's court was not a gift lightly given. "I do not wish to be a burden," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Kaelin's eyes softened ever so slightly. "You are not a burden," he said. "But the court will not understand, and neither will I, if I do not ensure you remain unharmed." For days, Leora learnt the rhythms of the castle, the hushed corridors, the careful movements of servants, the sharp eyes of the nobles. She discovered that the man who had saved her was not merely a king. He was a puzzle, a force of nature bound by rules, curses, and unspoken obligations. Every decision he made carried weight beyond understanding, yet she sensed a humanity in him that few ever glimpsed. One evening she overheard a conversation between two nobles, their voices thick with venom. "She is nothing but a pawn," one said. "Kaelin's favor means nothing. She is an outsider, and outsiders always fall." The words pricked at her pride, but instead of fear, they stirred determination. She realized that humiliation could be transformed into strength. She would not allow herself to be a pawn. Not in this castle. Not in this court. Kaelin appeared suddenly, as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves. His gaze swept the hall, sharp and unyielding. "Do you understand what it means to be in my court?" he asked. Leora met his eyes without flinching. "I do," she said. "It is a place of power." And of danger. Breath. Kaelin's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "And yet, you stand without fear."
It was a rare acknowledgement of her strength, and it stirred something inside her.
She wondered if he knew the effect he had on her, the way his mere presence could unbalance her, make her heart race, and her mind tremble. She could not name it, nor fully understand it, but she felt it in every glance, every subtle gesture. The days that followed were filled with small tests. Kaelin observed her silently, placing her in situations that revealed not just her character, but the depth of her courage. Free, she learned to navigate the intricate politics of the court, to recognize the eyes that watched her for weakness, and to hold her head high when whispers sought to tear her down. Yet the greatest challenge came not from the nobles, but from Kaelin himself. One evening he summoned her to the gardens, a place of quiet reflection where the moonlight fell in silver patterns upon the stone paths. The air was cool, scented with night-blooming flowers, and the sound of water trickling from a fountain filled the silence. "You have a strength few possess," Kaelin said, standing beside her. "But strength alone is not enough."
The court will seek to destroy you, and even I am bound by the rules of my house.
Leora looked at him, her heart beating faster than she could name. "I am not afraid of them," she said softly. "Nor of you."
Kaelin's gaze lingered on her, sharp as a blade and yet filled with an emotion he did not show often. "You should be," he said.
"For there are forces in this castle, in this kingdom, that you cannot yet imagine." A chill ran down her spine. He spoke not as a king commanding obedience, but as a man warning her of dangers unseen. And yet, in that warning was something else. A promise, or perhaps a test. She did not know which. Days turned into weeks, and Leora began to uncover truths about the court and Kaelin himself. She learned of the curse that bound his family, a darkness that demanded power, control, and sacrifice. It was whispered that any weakness in the Alpha King could unravel not just his reign, but the very kingdom itself. And in Kaelin, she saw the weight of that curse in every decision, every glance, every moment of silence. And yet she also saw glimpses of the man beneath the crown, the man capable of kindness, curiosity, and understanding. The man who had lifted her from the floor when the entire court had laughed. The man whose attention both terrified and enthralled her. Their bond, unspoken but undeniable, grew in subtle ways. A glance held too long, a hand brushing against hers, a quiet conversation in the moonlit gardens. The court began to notice whispers circling once more, though no one dared speak openly. But danger was never far away. One night, as the castle slept under the watch of a pale moon, an assassin's shadow crossed the outer walls. Leora, walking alone to the eastern wing, sensed something wrong. Her instincts, honed by days of navigating Kaelin's court, told her to run, but she was too late. A hand clamped over her mouth, and she was dragged into darkness. Panic surged through her, but a quiet part of her, the part that had refused to bow before the court, fought back. She kicked, struggled, and finally broke free for a moment, only to be grabbed again. It was then that a figure appeared, moving with impossible speed and precision. Desperation. His eyes burned like fire as he struck down the intruder, his movements both lethal and controlled. In moments the threat was gone and Leora was safe, trembling in his arms. "You should not walk alone," Kaelin said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Basket. Even in this castle, shadows hunt for weakness."
Leora, catching her breath, looked up at him.
"I can take care of myself," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Kaelin's gaze softened, yet it held the same intensity she had seen since their first meeting.
"Ah! You may think so," he said. "But strength alone will not keep you alive here."
You will need wisdom, cunning, and allies. She realized in that moment that Kaelin's protection came with both promise and burden.
She could not ignore the bond forming between them, nor the dangerous world that threatened them both. In the days that followed, Leora began to train, not in weapons or combat, but in observation, strategy, and understanding the intricate web of the court. Kaelin guided her silently, correcting her mistakes, offering subtle advice, and watching her grow. The tension between them was constant, a pull neither could fully resist, though neither acknowledged it openly. And then, one evening, the court gathered once more. A secret ritual, ancient and mysterious, was to be performed. A ceremony meant to reinforce Kaelin's power and remind the nobles of his authority. Leora was instructed to observe from the shadows, unseen and silent. But as the ritual began, a twist of fate revealed her presence to all. A misstep, a flicker of movement, and the nobles realized she was not just an observer. Some gasped, some sneered, some whispered. Kaelin's eyes snapped to her, and the entire hall seemed to still. The ceremony halted, the nobles frozen in anticipation. And then, something unexpected happened. Instead of punishment, Kaelin stepped forward and spoke in a voice that silenced even the loudest murmurs. "She belongs here," he said, "and she will remain by my side, whether any of you understand it or not." The nobles stared, their shock turning to indignation. Whispers of rebellion and discontent began to stir. Some noble hands went to their swords. Others muttered curses under their breath. Leora felt the weight of the king's protection heavier than ever before. And then, in a moment that no one could predict, the ritual backfired in a subtle but dangerous way. A spark of ancient magic, unintended and uncontrolled, flickered around Leora. It revealed not her weakness, but a hidden strength she had never known existed. A power that drew Kaelin's gaze with both fear and awe. The hall erupted in confusion. Nobles shouted, servants screamed, and the magic shimmered around her like a living thing. Leora realized with a mixture of wonder and terror that she might be more than a pawn in Kaelin's court. She might be the key to ending the curse that had haunted his family for generations, or the instrument of their destruction. Balin stepped forward, his dark eyes meeting hers. "You must control it," he said, "or it will consume you, and the kingdom along with it." Leora's heart pounded, and for the first time she understood the prophecy whispered through the castle. "The one who falls before the throne shall rise to command the king's heart." But the full meaning of the words, and the depth of the bond between her and Kaelin, was still hidden in shadows. The first true test of their intertwined fates had begun, and in the stillness of the hall the shadows of the court seemed to whisper. The games of power, desire, and destiny were only beginning, and neither the king nor the girl at his side would emerge unchanged. The storm had come without warning. Dark clouds swallowed the sky above Kaelin's kingdom, and rain fell like silver needles upon the cold stone of the castle walls. Inside, the corridor seemed quieter than usual, but the tension in the air was palpable. Leora had learned to trust her instincts, and tonight they screamed that danger was near. Kaelin had summoned her to the Eastern Gardens, a place of calm, even in the harshest weather. The fountains were silenced, the flowers bowed under the weight of the rain, and the stone paths glistened as if polished by tears. He waited, his figure tall and still beneath the flickering torches, shadows dancing across his face. "Barish, you have grown stronger," Kaelin said, his voice deep, almost a growl over the sound of the rain.
Stronger than I expected, but not from the cold.
She looked at him, her eyes searching. "Stronger?" she asked. "Or more entangled in the dangers I do not understand?" Kaelin's gaze sharpened. "Perhaps both," he said. "Your strength has grown, but so has the weight upon you. Every power has its price, Leora." She thought of the ritual in the court, of the spark of ancient magic that had danced around her. That moment had changed everything, showing her a power she did not yet fully control. And Kaelin had been there, both protector and observer, a presence that terrified and intrigued her in equal measure.
You do not trust me, Leora said softly, her voice almost lost in the storm.
Kaelin did not flinch. "I trust you enough to let you survive," he said. But trust is different from surrender, and surrender is dangerous for both of us. The words hung between them like a fragile thread. Leora realized she had not expected kindness from the Alpha King, nor did she fully understand the flicker of warmth beneath his authority. But she also knew that the closer she drew to him, the deeper the peril became. The court, the curse,
the very magic that had revealed her strength. All threatened to consume them both. That night, the kingdom fell under siege. A shadow army, whispered of in rumors and feared by even Kaelin's most loyal warriors, descended upon the outer walls. Their weapons gleamed in the storm light, and their presence was a reminder that the peace of the castle was always an illusion. Kaelin moved with swift decisiveness. "You must come with me," he said, offering his hand. Leora took it without hesitation, her trust tempered by survival instincts and something deeper, something she dared not name. They fled through secret passages, hidden corridors beneath the castle that few had ever traversed. The rain hammered above them, lightning splitting the sky as though the heavens themselves bore witness to the chaos descending upon the kingdom. Vast. Outside, the storm and the attackers created a perfect storm of danger. Kaelin's sword moved with precision, striking down those who threatened them, while Leora followed closely, her mind alert, her senses sharpened by the fear and urgency of the moment. She was no longer just a girl who had knelt in humiliation. She was a survivor, learning the delicate balance between courage and caution. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments. Time seemed suspended in the fury of the storm. Finally, they reached the edge of the Darkwood, a forest whispered about in fearful tones by the people of the kingdom. Its trees were tall, twisted and blackened by age, their branches clawing at the sky as though holding back the clouds themselves. "This will hide us. For now," Kaelin said, his voice low. His eyes, usually unreadable, softened as he looked at her. "But even here the danger is not gone." Leora nodded, though her mind was racing. She could see the storm reflected in Kaelin's dark eyes, the storm of responsibility, power, and unspoken longing. There was a weight in him that mirrored her own growing awareness of her strength, and she realized that their fates were entwined far more deeply than she had imagined. The nights in Darkwood were long.
Kaelin taught her not only to survive, but to understand the subtle currents of power that flowed through the kingdom and through herself.
He guided her in controlling the magic that had erupted during the court ritual, showing her how focus and intention could shape strength rather than allow it to consume her, pressing. And in the quiet moments when the storm had passed and only the soft rustle of leaves surrounded them, Kaelin's walls began to fall. Leora saw the man behind the crown, not the Alpha King who ruled with fear, but the man who had carried a burden he did not choose, whose family's curse had forced him to hide all vulnerability. "You are not like anyone else," Kaelin said one night as they sat beside a fire they had made in a small clearing.
You do not fear me, nor do you seek to manipulate me.
"But you are honest in a way this world rarely allows."
Leora looked into the flames, feeling the warmth of both the fire and the words.
"And you?" she asked softly.
"Are you honest with yourself? Are you honest with yourself?"
Kaelin's gaze darkened, a shadow passing across his face. He glances around in despair. "I do not know," he admitted. "To be honest, to feel, to care without using it as a weapon, it is dangerous." She reached out almost instinctively and placed her hand lightly on his arm. The gesture was small, tentative, yet it carried a weight neither of them could ignore. In that simple touch, trust and longing coexisted, fragile and powerful. But peace is never permanent in a world ruled by curses and ambition. One evening, as the wind whispered through the Darkwood, an ambush shattered the fragile calm. Shadows moved between the trees, and Leora's heart leapt with fear. Kaelin's sword was swift, his movements precise, but even he could not anticipate the full scope of the danger. Leora was pulled into the fray, her own instincts guiding her as she fought alongside him. The storm of conflict was overwhelming, yet something inside her surged, a strength she had not known she possessed. And then it happened. A shadowy figure, cloaked in darkness,
struck at her. She staggered, unprepared, and felt herself falling. But before she could hit the ground, Kaelin's hand closed around hers, pulling her upright. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the walls between them crumbled. "You are mine to protect," Kaelin said, his voice low, fierce, and unwavering. "Do you understand?" Leora, breathing heavily, met his gaze. I understand," she whispered, though the truth was deeper than words could express. She understood that their bond was no longer simply about survival. It was about trust, longing, and the dangerous magic of hearts entwined in ways neither could fully control. The attack was repelled, but the consequences were clear. Leora had glimpsed her own power in its rawest form, and Kaelin had glimpsed the vulnerability and courage that made her more than a pawn, more than an outsider. They had emerged victorious, yet neither was unchanged. In the aftermath, as they rested beneath the shelter of ancient trees, Leora felt a storm of emotion she could not name. Fear, exhilaration, gratitude, and a dangerous spark of something more, something forbidden, swirled within her. Kaelin's presence was a constant weight, drawing her in, challenging her, and awakening a longing she had thought impossible in the harsh world she had entered. But the darkness of the kingdom was not yet defeated. Whispers of betrayal reached them even in the isolation of Darkwood. One of Kaelin's most trusted allies had vanished, replaced by someone whose loyalty was uncertain. The prophecy, the curse, the fragile trust. They all hung like shadows over their heads. Kaelin spoke finally, his voice low and resolute. "The time is coming when we can no longer hide, Leora. The kingdom will demand us, the court will demand us, and the curse will demand us. We must be ready. Together." Leora nodded, understanding the truth of his words. Together they were stronger, but together they were also vulnerable in ways neither had anticipated. She felt the weight of her own growing power, the responsibility she had once feared, and the undeniable pull between them that no words could define. And then, as the moon rose high above the trees, a chilling sound shattered the stillness of the night. Leora's heart froze. A voice, low and menacing, carried through the shadows of the forest, a voice that promised danger, betrayal, and a revelation that would shake both the kingdom and their hearts to their very cores. Kaelin's eyes darkened, his body tense, and he whispered, almost to himself, "They have found us, and they will not stop until one of us falls. Press." Leora felt the gravity of the moment press against her chest. Their bond had deepened, their trust had grown, and their hearts had begun to recognize a dangerous connection they could not deny. Yet the threat looming in the shadows reminded her, and Kaelin, that love and survival in a world of kings, curses, and power were never free of sacrifice. The night was long, the shadows deep, and the storm within their hearts more powerful than any tempest outside. And in the silence that followed, the prophecy whispered once more, almost unbearably clear, "The one who falls before the throne shall rise to command the king's heart." But for now the throne was far away. The court was a distant danger. And the shadows of the Darkwood held secrets neither could yet face. One thing was certain. Their journey was only beginning, and the next test would demand courage, trust, and a willingness to face the darkness within themselves, and within each other. The first light of dawn broke over the kingdom, pale and fragile against a sky still bruised with storm clouds. Darkwood, which had hidden them for so long, now seemed a fragile barrier against the forces they could no longer escape. Leora stood at the edge of the forest, her hair wet from the rain, her eyes sharp with determination. The wind carried whispers of the court, of enemies who would not rest, and of the curse that had haunted Kaelin's family for generations.
Kaelin appeared beside her, silent as a shadow.
His armor gleamed even in the soft light, and his expression was one of both resolve and weariness. The nights in Darkwood had been long,
filled with training, strategizing, and moments of quiet revelation. He had seen her courage, her hidden power, and the spark within her that could rival even the oldest magic of the kingdom. "You are ready," he said finally, his voice low, but steady. "The court awaits. The curse waits." "And we cannot hide any longer." But she felt the weight of the journey pressing on her. But she also felt strength she had never known. She had grown from the girl who knelt in humiliation in the great hall into someone capable of facing both destiny and danger. And yet, the closeness she felt with Kaelin both comforted and unsettled her. Their bond had deepened beyond words, filled with unspoken trust and longing, but also the knowledge that one misstep could destroy them both. They moved together through the forest, emerging into the open plains that led toward the castle. From the distance, the walls loomed, tall and imposing, a reminder that the kingdom was both their home and the stage of the final trial. Nobles loyal to Kaelin had prepared defenses, but spies and traitors had infiltrated the court. The enemy was waiting. And so was the prophecy. As they approached, Leora felt the familiar spark of magic stir within her. It had grown stronger during their time in the forest, tempered by Kaelin's guidance and her own determination. She now understood that it was not a force to be feared, but a tool, a weapon to protect those she cared for and to challenge the darkness that had ruled Kaelin's family for generations. Kaelin noticed her focus, breath. "Control it," he said, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Let it flow through you, not against you. Trust yourself, and trust me." Leora closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm of her power, the pulse of energy in her veins. It was like a river, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but always alive. She drew it in, bending it with her will, shaping it into something formidable. She could feel the presence of enemies beyond the walls, their intentions sharp as daggers. And yet she was no longer afraid. Not entirely. They arrived at the outer gate. Kaelin raised his hand, and loyal soldiers bowed in respect. Alice stepped beside him, her figure calm, composed, yet radiating the quiet strength that had grown during their exile. The nobles of the court, seeing them approach, could not hide their shock. Breath. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some fearful, some awed.
Leora had returned not as the humiliated girl, but as someone who carried both power and destiny.
Inside the throne room, the tension was thick. Nobles who had once mocked her now watched with wary eyes. The shadows of betrayal lingered in corners, and the curse that had haunted Kaelin's lineage seemed almost palpable, twisting the air with ancient magic. Leora stepped forward. "I am here," she said, her voice steady. "Not as a pawn, not as a servant, but as someone who will stand for what is right. The curse ends tonight." A hush fell over the hall. Even Kaelin's most loyal allies felt the weight of her words. The enemy had infiltrated the court, but her presence, her power, and her unwavering courage created a ripple of hope that even the darkest forces could not ignore. Kaelin moved beside her, his hand brushing hers ever so slightly.
The gesture was small, yet it carried a depth of meaning neither had fully acknowledged before. Trust,
respect, and something more. A bond forged through trials, danger, and unspoken longing. Then, as if summoned by their defiance, the shadows moved. Figures cloaked in darkness emerged from hidden doors and corridors. They struck without warning, a coordinated force of betrayal meant to seize the throne and shatter the kingdom. Kaelin drew his sword with fluid grace, moving with precision, striking down attackers with both authority and controlled fury. Best. Leora focused, letting her magic flow through her, shaping it into barriers, shields, and bursts of energy that protected both herself and those around her. Together they were unstoppable, not merely because of strength, but because of the trust they shared and the bond that had grown between them in the storm of Darkwood.
The battle was fierce.
Nobles who had hidden in shadows revealed their loyalty to the enemy, attacking those who had fought beside Kaelin. Leora's power flared, bright and intense, pushing back the darkness. Breath. She realized that her courage was not just her own, it was Kaelin's, the loyalty of the kingdom, and the strength of her own heart intertwined. At the center of the chaos, Kaelin faced the leader of the conspirators. Their clash shook the hall, steel ringing against steel. Kaelin fought with all his skill, but it was Leora who changed the tide. Back as she stepped forward, her hands glowing with the controlled magic she had learned to wield. With a surge of energy, she forced the enemy to retreat, revealing their vulnerability. Kaelin seized the opportunity, striking with precision and finally ending the threat. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and the flicker of torchlight. The court, once filled with whispers and suspicion, now stared in awe at the pair who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Leora's heart raced, not with fear, but with relief. The curse that had haunted Kaelin's family for generations had not been broken by might alone, but by trust, courage, and the bond that had grown between them. And in that moment she realized that her own journey of humiliation, fear, and struggle had transformed her into someone capable of shaping her destiny. Kaelin lowered his sword, his eyes meeting hers. Breath. There was no need for words. In their shared glance she saw respect, admiration, and something more. A recognition of hearts entwined, tested by fire and shadow, and now unbreakable. The nobles of the court, once mocking, now bowed in acknowledgement. Leora had proven herself, not by title or lineage, but by courage, wisdom, and the strength of her spirit. Kaelin stepped forward, his hand finding hers. "This kingdom," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "is protected not only by power, but by the courage of those who rise when they are tested." "Leora, you have proven that courage beyond measure."
Leora felt a warmth spread through her chest.
She had faced humiliation, betrayal, and the weight of prophecy, and she had endured. But the true reward was not recognition or victory. It was the bond she had formed with Kaelin, the understanding that together they could face any darkness. The court remained silent for a moment, the air heavy with awe and disbelief. And then, in a gesture that shocked even the most loyal nobles, Kaelin raised Leora's hand. The crowd gasped, for no king had ever so openly acknowledged the strength and courage of one who had once been humiliated before the throne. "This is the one," Kaelin said, his voice steady, "whose heart, courage, and strength have changed the course of this kingdom. She stands with me, not as a subject, not as a pawn, but as an equal. And together we will rule with justice, honor, and wisdom." The proclamation was more than words. It was a declaration of trust, redemption, and the end of the long shadow of the curse that had bound Kaelin's family. The prophecy, once a whispered warning, had been fulfilled, not through force alone, but through courage, love, and the willingness to face the darkness together. Later in the quiet of the throne room, Kaelin and Leora stood alone. The battle had ended, the threat removed, yet the weight of their journey remained. They had faced danger, magic, and betrayal, and they had emerged not only victorious, but transformed. "You have changed me," Kaelin said softly, his eyes dark and intense. "Not because of what you did, but because of who you are." Leora smiled, a mixture of relief and understanding in her gaze. "And you have changed me," she said, "not because of your power, but because you trusted me when no one else would." For a long moment, they stood in silence. the echoes of the past battles fading into the quiet. The throne room, once filled with tension and whispers, now held only the warmth of mutual respect, trust, and the unspoken bond that had grown through trials neither could have faced alone. Finally, Kaelin reached out, taking her hand in both of his. "The kingdom is ours to protect," he said. "But the life we build, that is ours to shape together." Leora squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly, replaced by hope and the quiet promise of a future they would face side by side. Together, she agreed, her voice steady. And in that moment, the court and the kingdom understood. The girl who had knelt in humiliation before the throne had risen, not only to command respect, but to command the heart of the Alpha King. Their bond, forged in adversity, strengthened by trials and tempered by courage, would stand as a legend whispered for generations. Outside, the sun rose fully over the kingdom, casting light upon the walls, the people, and the lives forever changed by courage, trust, and the power of hearts united. The curse was broken. The kingdom was safe, and Leora and Kaelin, once strangers bound by fate, now stood together, not as ruler and subject, but as partners, equals, and protectors of a future they would shape with their own hands. The prophecy had come true. The one who had fallen before the throne had indeed risen to command the king's heart, not through submission, but through courage, wisdom, and the quiet strength of her spirit. And as the wind carried the whispers of the dark wood into the open plains, the legend of Leora and Kaelin began, a story of humility, courage, love, and redemption that would be remembered for generations.